The stars sang every morning at exactly 7 Galactic Standard Time, and Jake Morrison hated it. He stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, watching as 200 different alien species across 3 galaxies joined their minds in perfect harmony. The sound that filled space was beautiful beyond human understanding, like crystal bells mixed with ocean waves and wind through silver trees. But when humans tried to join the song, everything went wrong. Captain Morrison was 35 years old and had been in space for half his life. He had brown hair that refused to stay neat and green eyes that saw trouble before it arrived. His crew trusted him because he never lied to them, even when the truth hurt. Today the truth was going to hurt a lot. The bridge door slid open and Lisa Campbell walked in. She was the best engineer in the human fleet, a woman who could fix anything with spare parts and determination. Her red hair was tied back in a practical ponytail, and her blue jumpsuit had grease stains that told stories of late nights keeping the ship running. She carried a data pad that glowed with bad news. "The harmonics are getting worse," Lisa said without greeting. She never wasted words. When the situation was serious, "Our frequency is causing pain to the Etherians on Deck 4. Dr. Walsh had to give them medicine to stop the headaches." Jake nodded and looked out at the stars. The Liberty was orbiting Melodia Prime, a world where music was alive and buildings grew from sound itself. The planet was home to the Resonance, ancient beings made of living crystal who had founded the Galactic Confederation 5,000 years ago. They were the ones who had invited humanity to join the Great Alliance of Species, and they were also the ones who regretted it most. "Captain," came a voice from the communications station. Ryan Torres was 28 and had the best ears in the fleet. He could hear signals that most humans missed and translate languages that computers could not understand. His dark skin was covered in sweat and his hands shook as he worked. "The Resonance are calling for you. They want to meet in the Harmony Chamber." Jake felt his stomach drop. The Harmony Chamber was where the Confederation made its most important decisions. No one was called there unless something very good or very bad was about to happen. Given how the morning had started, Jake was betting on very bad. Dr. Amy Walsh entered the bridge as if she had been summoned by their worried thoughts. She was the ship's medical officer, a woman who could heal bodies and minds with equal skill. Her blonde hair was always perfect and her white coat was always clean. But her brown eyes were tired from dealing with problems that medicine could not fix. "The suppression fields are not working," Amy said quietly. "Every time we try to match our brainwaves to the galactic frequency, we lose something important. The test subjects become docile and empty. They stop creating, stop questioning, stop being human." Jake had known this day would come. Humanity had been part of the Confederation for only 5 years, and those years had been filled with complaints. Human music was too loud and chaotic. Human art was too emotional and unpredictable. Human thoughts were too wild and dangerous. The other species whispered that humans were primitive beings, who had been given advanced technology too soon. The worst part was that some of it was true. Humans were chaotic compared to the elegant Etherians who moved like dancing light. They were emotional compared to the logical synthetics who made decisions based on pure reason. They were unpredictable compared to the peaceful gardeners who had not fought a war in 1,000 years, but Jake believed that chaos and emotion and unpredictability were not weaknesses. They were what made humans special. When every other species followed the same patterns and sang the same songs, humans created new possibilities. They solved problems in ways that surprised everyone, including themselves. The meeting in the Harmony Chamber lasted 3 hours. Jake sat at a table made of singing crystal while 12 different species explained why humanity was a problem. The Resonance spoke in voices like wind chimes, telling him that human thoughts created discordance in the galactic song. The graceful Etherians showed him energy patterns that proved human emotions caused pain to sensitive minds. The wise philosophers presented data showing that human unpredictability was disrupting trade routes and diplomatic relations. At the end of the meeting, the lead resonant delivered the ultimatum. Humanity had 1 solar cycle to learn perfect harmony or face expulsion from the Confederation. They would be sent back to their small corner of space and forbidden from traveling beyond their own star system. Earth would become a prison planet for a species too chaotic to join civilized society. Jake returned to his ship with the weight of his entire species on his shoulders. As he walked through the corridors, he saw his crew working with the dedication and creativity that made humans special. They did not know yet that everything they had worked for was about to end. They did not know that in 1 year, humanity might be alone in the dark between the stars. The morning song began again as Jake reached his quarters. All across the galaxy, alien voices joined in perfect harmony while human voices remained silent. For the first time in his life, Jake wondered if silence might be better than a song that had no place for them. 6 months had passed since the ultimatum, and Jake Morrison could feel time running out like sand through his fingers. The USS Liberty was patrolling the outer rim of Confederate space when the first distress signal arrived. It came from New Haven, a peaceful farming world where 3 different species had lived together for 200 years. The signal lasted exactly 17 seconds before cutting off into silence that felt like death. Ryan Torres worked frantically at his station, trying to raise any response from New Haven. His fingers danced across controls that had never failed him before. But the space where a thriving world should be was empty of all communication. Even the automated beacon that every Confederate world transmitted was gone. "Captain," Lisa Campbell called from her engineering station. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the worry underneath. "I'm reading some very strange energy signatures from that system. The patterns don't match anything in our database." "Doctor." Amy Walsh looked up from her medical scanner with confusion written across her face. "I'm detecting massive bioenergy disruption. It's like someone turned off the life force of an entire planet." Jake ordered the Liberty to jump to New Haven at maximum speed. The journey took 6 hours, and each minute felt like a year. When they finally arrived at the system, what they found made Jake's blood turn cold. New Haven was still there, spinning peacefully around its yellow sun. The cities were intact and the farms were green with growing crops. But there was no life anywhere. The sensors showed buildings full of people who were not dead but were not alive either. They moved like sleepwalkers, performing daily tasks without thought or purpose. The landing party that Jake led down to the surface found a world of living ghosts. Farmers continued to work their fields with empty eyes. Children played games they did not understand. Parents cared for families they did not remember loving. When Jake tried to speak to them, they looked through him as if he was made of air. Dr. Walsh ran every medical test she could think of. The people had heartbeats and brain activity, but something essential was missing. Their life energy had been drained away, leaving only empty shells that knew how to move but not how to live. "It's like something fed on their souls," Amy whispered, as they examined a family that sat around a dinner table, eating food they could not taste. The same pattern repeated at 4 more worlds over the next 2 weeks. Each time, the Liberty arrived to find planets full of living corpses. Each time, Jake sent reports to Confederate Command and received responses that grew more desperate with every message. Admiral Kate Sullivan called an emergency meeting on the Confederate capital world of Harmony Station. Jake had served under Sullivan for 10 years and had never seen her look frightened before. She was a woman who had faced down space pirates and hostile aliens without blinking, but now her hands shook as she presented the evidence to the assembled fleet commanders. "The Devourers have returned," Sullivan said, and the room fell silent. Jake had heard stories about the Devourers from the old archives. They were beings of pure hunger that consumed life energy instead of matter. 1,000 years ago, they had nearly destroyed the galaxy before the Confederation had found a way to drive them back into the darkness. Between realities, the defense had always been the galactic harmony. Every morning, when the species sang together, they created a barrier of unified energy that the Devourers could not cross. For 1,000 years, that barrier had held strong, but now it was failing, and everyone knew why. The emergency session of the Confederate Council was held in the great crystal chamber at the heart of Harmony Station. Representatives from every species gathered to discuss the crisis, and Jake found himself standing before beings that usually pretended he did not exist. The lead resonant spoke in a voice like breaking glass. The barrier weakens because humanity's discord corrupts our harmony. Your chaotic thoughts create cracks that the devourers exploit. An Etherean delegation leader floated forward, her form shifting like liquid light. The mathematical analysis is clear. Human mental patterns disrupt the quantum frequency we use to maintain the barrier. Each day they remain connected to our network. The protection grows weaker. Jake wanted to argue, but the evidence was hard to deny. The devourer attacks had begun 6 months ago, exactly when humanity had started trying to join the galactic harmony. Every time humans attempted to add their voices to the morning song, the barrier flickered. The synthetic representative presented data in cold, logical terms. Probability of galactic survival with continued human participation in harmonic network? 12%. Probability of galactic survival with human isolation? 87%. The solution they proposed was elegant and terrible. Every human in Confederate space would be fitted with harmonic suppression fields. The devices would force human brainwaves into perfect alignment with galactic frequency, eliminating the chaos that weakened the barrier. Dr. Walsh had already tested the suppression fields on volunteers. Jake had read her reports and felt sick. The suppressed humans became perfect citizens who never questioned orders or created problems. They also never invented anything new or solved problems in unexpected ways. They became exactly like every other species in the Confederation, predictable, peaceful, and empty of the spark that made them human. The procedure is reversible, the resonant assured the assembly, but Jake knew it was a lie. No one who underwent suppression ever asked to have it removed. They were too content in their artificial peace to remember what they had lost. Jake stood before the most powerful beings in the galaxy and made his choice. We refuse. The chamber erupted in shocked harmonics. Species that had never shown emotion expressed their dismay in frequencies that made the crystal walls ring like bells. The resonance forms flickered with outrage. Then you condemn yourselves to exile, the lead resonant declared. Humanity will be removed from Confederate space immediately. You will return to your home system and remain there until you learn to control your chaotic nature. As Jake walked out of the chamber, he wondered if he had just saved humanity or doomed it. Outside the great windows of Harmony Station, he could see ships from a dozen worlds working together to evacuate human populations. Soon, every human in the galaxy would be heading home to Earth. Leaving behind the stars they had dreamed of exploring, the Confederation celebrated their decision. With humanity gone, the galactic harmony would be pure again. The barrier would hold strong against the devourers. Peace would return to the galaxy, but Jake had a terrible feeling that they were all wrong. As he watched human ships disappear into hyperspace, he remembered something his grandfather had told him long ago. Sometimes the things that make you different are the same things that keep you alive. The exodus of humanity took 3 months to complete. Jake Morrison watched from the Bridge of the Liberty as the last human transport ship disappeared into the hyperspace tunnel that would take them home to Earth. Around him, Confederate space became suddenly quiet as 2 million human voices fell silent. Admiral Kate Sullivan had chosen to stay behind with a small fleet of volunteer ships. She called it monitoring the situation, but Jake knew she was really planning for war. The Admiral had never been good at backing down from a fight, and she was not about to start now. The Confederation thinks they've solved their problem, Sullivan said during their final briefing. Let's see how long their perfect harmony lasts without us to blame for everything. Jake had kept the Liberty and her crew in Confederate space against direct orders. Lisa Campbell had disabled their tracking systems so that command could not force them to return. Dr. Walsh had volunteered to stay despite knowing they might never see Earth again. Ryan Torres had simply refused to leave, saying that someone needed to keep listening to what the galaxy was saying. They did not have to wait long to learn the truth. The first devourer attack after humanity's departure hit the Etherean homeworld of Luminaris. Jake and his crew arrived 12 hours after the distress call went out, but they were too late to help. The planet that had once shone like a star was now dark and cold. 7 billion Etherians had been reduced to empty shells that wandered through cities of broken light. What shocked Jake most was how quickly it had happened. The Etherians had always claimed their harmony made them strong, but the Devourers had swept through their defenses like they were made of paper. The perfect unity that the Confederation prized had become a perfect weakness. Lisa Campbell studied the attack patterns from her engineering station and made a discovery that changed everything. "Captain, look at these energy readings." The Devourers aren't random anymore. They're learning. She was right. The historical records described Devourers as mindless predators that consumed everything in their path. But these attacks were strategic and planned. The creatures had targeted communication centers first, then power stations, then population centers. They moved like an army instead of a swarm. Dr. Walsh found evidence of the same intelligence in her medical scans. The way they drained life. Energy shows advanced understanding of biology. They knew exactly how much to take to leave the victims alive but empty. This wasn't feeding, it was harvesting. Ryan Torres made the most disturbing discovery of all. While monitoring Confederate communications, he detected something impossible. The Devourers were talking to each other. The signals were faint and used frequencies that most species could not hear, but human ears could pick them up. "They have a language," Ryan said with wonder and fear in his voice. "It's complex and structured. These aren't monsters, Captain. They're people." Jake shared this information with Admiral Sullivan, who immediately began developing new strategies. If the Devourers were intelligent, they could be reasoned with. If they could be reasoned with, maybe war could be avoided. But the Confederation was not interested in reason. They were interested in blame. Emergency broadcasts from Harmony Station accused humanity of sabotaging the galactic barrier before leaving. Confederate leaders claimed that human agents had weakened the harmonic network to allow Devourer infiltration. Some species called for military action against Earth itself. Jake knew the accusations were false. But he also knew something else. The Confederation's harmony was failing even without human interference. Each time the remaining species sang their morning song, the barrier became more predictable. The Devourers, with their newfound intelligence, were learning to counter every defensive pattern. The breaking point came when the synthetic homeworld fell. The logical beings had calculated their defense down to the smallest detail, creating mathematical certainties that should have been impossible to overcome. The Devourers broke through anyway, proving that pure logic was just another kind of predictability. Jake made a decision that would have horrified his superiors. He took the Liberty into Devourer-controlled space, heading for the ruins of New Haven where it had all begun. If the Devourers were intelligent, he was going to try to communicate with them. The journey took 2 days through space that felt dead and cold. When they reached New Haven, Jake found the planet surrounded by energy, clouds that pulsed with strange rhythms. The Devourers were still there, and they were waiting. Ryan Torres worked his magic at the communications station, trying to find a frequency that the Devourers would recognize. For hours, he broadcast mathematical sequences and musical patterns into the void. Jake was beginning to think the plan was hopeless when something answered. The voice that came through the speakers was unlike anything Jake had ever heard. It was made of harmonics and dissonance, order and chaos mixed together in patterns that hurt to understand. But within the alien sounds, Ryan detected something familiar: pain. "They're suffering," Ryan said with amazement. "Captain, they're not attacking because they want to. They're dying, and they don't know how to stop it." Jake authorized direct contact despite every regulation in the book. What he learned from the Devourers changed his understanding of everything. They were not from this galaxy or even this universe. They were refugees from a reality where entropy had consumed all energy sources. Their universe was dying, and they had been sent here to find a way to save their people. The problem was that Devourers could only consume energy, not create it. They were like children who had been given knives but never taught how to cook. Every planet they drained brought them closer to starvation because they did not know how to make the energy last. "We hunger," the Devourer voice said through patterns that made Ryan wince. "We take but do not understand. Teach us to grow what we consume. Jake realized that the galaxy was facing two problems, not one. The Devourers needed to learn how to create energy instead of just taking it, and the Confederation needed to learn that their perfect harmony was a trap that made them vulnerable to any enemy smart enough to understand patterns. The solution would require the one thing the Confederation had rejected: chaos. Human unpredictability was exactly what both sides needed. It could teach the Devourers to create instead of consume, and it could make the galactic barrier truly unpredictable. But first, Jake had to convince two sides that hated each other to work together. The Confederation blamed humans for their problems, and humans had good reason to hate the Confederation for casting them out. The Devourers were desperate and dangerous, while the remaining galactic species were terrified and angry. Jake looked out at the stars and saw a galaxy at war with itself. Somewhere out there, the Confederation was singing their morning song, with fewer voices each day. Somewhere else, his own people were preparing for exile on Earth, and all around him, ancient beings from a dead universe were slowly starving in a reality they did not understand. The galaxy needed a new song, one that combined chaos and harmony into something neither side had imagined. Jake was going to give it to them, whether they wanted it or not. The attack on Earth came without warning on a Tuesday morning when most of the planet was still asleep. Jake Morrison was 3 days into negotiations with the Devourers when Admiral Kate Sullivan's emergency transmission reached him across the void. "They found us." Sullivan's voice crackled through static and interference. "Devourer ships just dropped out of hyperspace around Earth, 8 billion people. And we've got maybe 6 hours before they break through our defenses." Jake felt his heart stop. Earth was humanity's last refuge, the one place in the galaxy they could call home. If it fell, his species would be scattered across the stars with nowhere to run. But more than that, Earth was where his sister lived with her 2 children, where his parents had retired to a small farm in Kansas, where every human he had ever loved was waiting for a war they could not win. "All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan," came the broadcast on all frequencies. "Operation Discordant Strike is now active. I repeat, Discordant Strike is active." Jake knew what that meant. For 6 months, human engineers and scientists had been working in secret, developing technologies that the Confederation had never seen. They had been preparing for the day when their exile would become a death sentence. Dr. Amy Walsh looked up from her station with eyes that burned with determination. "Captain, if we're going to save Earth, we need to get there now. But with conventional hyperspace, we'll arrive too late." Lisa Campbell smiled with the confidence of someone who had been planning for this moment. "Good thing we don't use conventional hyperspace anymore." Her fingers danced across controls that activated systems the Confederation would have called impossible. "Chaos drive is online. Hold on to something." The USS Liberty disappeared from normal space in a flash of energy that followed no known laws of physics. Instead of traveling through hyperspace tunnels, the ship phased in and out of reality itself, taking shortcuts through dimensions that existed only in mathematical theory. What should have been a 3-day journey took 3 hours. When they emerged near Earth, Jake saw a battle unlike anything in galactic history. The human fleet was outnumbered 100 to 1, but they were fighting with weapons and tactics that defied every military manual ever written. Ships appeared and disappeared at random, following flight patterns so chaotic that enemy targeting systems could not lock onto them. Admiral Sullivan's flagship danced between Devourer attack formations, like a leaf in a hurricane. Her ship's Discord weapons tore holes in space itself, creating pockets of twisted physics that the energy-based Devourers could not navigate. Other human vessels used probability bombs that made cause and effect function backward, turning enemy attacks into healing energy. But the most impressive sight was Earth itself. The planet was surrounded by a shell of chaotic energy that pulsed with every color Jake had ever seen and several he had not. The barrier was not the perfect harmony that the Confederation used, but a wild symphony that changed its tune every second. How are they maintaining that defense? Ryan Torres asked in amazement as he analyzed the energy patterns. Dr. Walsh checked her readings and laughed with delight. They're using the entire population. Every human on Earth is contributing their unique brainwave pattern to the barrier. 8 billion different frequencies creating controlled chaos that nothing can predict. Jake realized that humanity had found its own answer to the galactic song. Instead of trying to force everyone to sing the same tune, they had learned to make harmony from difference. The barrier around Earth was stronger than anything the Confederation had ever created because it was built from 8 billion unique voices working together. But even with their new weapons and defenses, the human fleet was taking heavy losses. Jake could see ships being overwhelmed by sheer numbers as more Devourer vessels poured through dimensional rifts. Earth's barrier was holding, but it would not last forever against such overwhelming force. That was when Jake made the most important decision of his life. Instead of joining the battle, he took the Liberty straight toward the largest concentration of Devourer ships. Dr. Walsh thought he had lost his mind, but Jake had a plan that was crazy enough to work. Ryan Torres opened communication channels to both sides of the battle. His message went out simultaneously to Admiral Sullivan's fleet and to the Devourer collective consciousness. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the USS Liberty. I'm calling for an immediate ceasefire. We have information that will save both our species. The response from Sullivan was immediate and colorful. Jake, you magnificent lunatic, this is not the time for diplomacy. The response from the Devourers was more complex but equally urgent. Through Ryan's translation, Jake heard the voice of beings who were desperate and afraid. We cannot stop. We hunger beyond endurance. Your world shines with life we must consume. Or die. Jake positioned the Liberty between the two fleets and began broadcasting on all frequencies. What he told them changed the nature of the battle from conquest to rescue mission. The Devourers aren't invaders, Jake announced. They're refugees from a dead universe. They're dying because they only know how to consume energy, not create it. And we're fighting them because we think they want to destroy us. But what if we could teach them another way? Admiral Sullivan's response was predictable. Jake, they just tried to eat our planet. But Jake had learned something during his communication with the Devourers that no one else knew. They're children, he said. Their parent civilization sent them here to survive, but they never taught them how to create energy. They only know how to take it, Dr. Walsh understood first. It's like giving a baby a gun. They're dangerous because they don't know how to be anything else. Jake authorized the most dangerous experiment in human history. He ordered Lisa Campbell to extend the ship's chaos field to encompass both human and Devourer vessels. The energy barrier that surrounded the Liberty began to include ships from both sides, forcing them into the same chaotic harmony that protected Earth. The effect was immediate and shocking. Human ships found their weapons powering down as the field neutralized their aggressive intent. Devourer vessels discovered that their hunger was being fed by the chaotic energy itself, giving them sustenance without requiring them to drain life force. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers experienced satisfaction without consumption. They could feel energy flowing into them from the chaotic field, nourishing them in ways they had never imagined possible. Ryan Torres became the bridge between two species that had never understood each other. Through him, the Devourers learned that energy could be grown instead of stolen. Through him, humans learned that the galaxy's greatest threat was really its greatest victim. The ceasefire that followed was fragile and temporary, but it gave both sides time to think instead of fight. Jake had stopped a war, but he had not yet won the peace. That would require something even more difficult, convincing the Confederation that their perfect harmony was the real enemy. As Jake looked out at Earth, still shining with its chaotic barrier, he knew that humanity had found its true purpose in the galaxy. They were not meant to sing in harmony with everyone else. They were meant to teach the universe that difference was not discord, but the source of all strength. The joint expedition to the Devourer home dimension launched from Earth 3 weeks after the ceasefire. Jake Morrison found himself commanding a fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. human ships flying alongside devourer vessels. Their chaotic energy fields merged into a single protective barrier that pulsed with impossible colors. Dr. Amy Walsh had spent those weeks developing translation protocols that allowed direct mind-to-mind communication between humans and devourers. The process was painful and dangerous, requiring volunteers to open their consciousness to alien thoughts that operated on completely different principles. But it was the only way to build the trust needed for their desperate mission. The volunteers came from unexpected places. Commander Lisa Campbell was the first to step forward, her engineer's mind fascinated by the challenge of understanding beings made of pure energy. Ryan Torres followed, his natural talent for communication making him the perfect bridge between species. Even Admiral Kate Sullivan volunteered, though she grumbled about diplomatic nonsense the entire time. The Devourer home dimension existed in a fold of space-time that could only be accessed through controlled chaos. Human chaos drives opened the portal while Devourer energy patterns stabilized it, creating a tunnel between realities that should not have been possible. What they found on the other side broke Jake's heart. The Devourer universe was dying in ways that defied imagination. Stars had burned out, leaving only cold husks drifting in eternal darkness. Planets were empty shells where life had consumed itself long ago. Even space itself was running out of energy, slowly grinding toward absolute zero. At the center of it all was the nursery, a massive structure built from crystallized time where the last Devourer civilization had gathered their children before sending them to find salvation in other realities. The beings that Jake's fleet met there were ancient beyond human understanding, but they welcomed the visitors with gratitude that transcended language. Through Dr. Walsh's translation protocols, Jake learned the true history of the Devourers. They had once been gardeners of reality, beings who cultivated energy across multiple dimensions. But their universe had been infected by something they called the Grey Hunger, a force that consumed possibility itself. In their desperation to save their children, they had taught them only survival, not creation. "We gave them teeth but not wisdom," the elder Devourers explained through harmonics that made Jake's bones ache. "We taught them to take but not to give. In our fear, we made them into the very thing we fought against." The solution required something that had never been attempted, teaching an entire species to change their fundamental nature. Jake's team had brought samples of Earth's biosphere, examples of how controlled chaos could create sustainable energy. But showing the Devourers these examples was different from teaching them to apply the principles. Lisa Campbell worked with Devourer engineers to build bioharmonic generators, devices that could convert chaotic thought patterns into stable energy. The machines were part technology and part living organism, requiring constant attention and creativity to function properly. Dr. Walsh developed training programs that taught young Devourers to resist their hunger instincts. Instead of consuming everything they encountered, they learned to nurture energy sources and help them grow. The process was slow and difficult, with many failures for every success, but the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The Elder Devourers revealed that their universe still contained pockets of potential energy, hidden in places where the Grey Hunger had not yet reached. These energy gardens had been abandoned when the evacuation began, but they could be restored with the right combination of chaos and harmony. Jake split his fleet into teams that traveled to dozens of dead worlds, each one hiding a dormant energy garden. Human creativity provided the chaotic spark needed to restart the gardens, while Devourer knowledge supplied the harmonic structure to sustain them. The work was dangerous and exhausting. Several team members were lost when experiments went wrong, consumed by energies they did not understand. Others suffered mental damage from prolonged exposure to alien thought patterns. But slowly, impossibly, dead worlds began to bloom with new kinds of life. Admiral Sullivan led the most ambitious project, attempting to restart a collapsed star using controlled chaos. The theory was sound, but the execution was terrifying. Her ship dove into the stellar remnant while channeling chaotic energy patterns that should have torn reality apart. Instead, the star caught fire with new kinds of fusion that burned chaos itself as fuel, Ryan Torres made the most important discovery when he found a way to communicate with the Grey Hunger itself. The force that had destroyed the Devourer universe was not evil or malicious, but lonely beyond comprehension. It was the last remnant of a reality that had died before the Devourers had even evolved, seeking connection through the only method it knew: consumption. It doesn't want to destroy, Ryan explained after days of painful mental contact. It wants to join. But it's so old and alien that joining and consuming feel the same to it. This revelation changed everything. Instead of fighting the Grey Hunger, Jake's team began teaching it the same lessons they had taught the Devourers. Through carefully controlled interactions, they showed the ancient force how to nurture instead of consume, how to create connections without destroying what it touched. The process took months and nearly killed Ryan several times. But eventually, the Grey Hunger learned to become something new, a force that could repair damaged reality instead of consuming it. The effect spread across the Devourer universe like a healing wave, restoring energy to places that had been dead. For millennia, Jake watched from the Bridge of the Liberty as entire star systems came back to life. Planets that had been cold rocks for eons began generating their own energy. Space itself started producing the quantum fluctuations that made advanced physics possible, but the most remarkable change was in the Devourers themselves. As their universe healed, they evolved beyond their hunger instincts. Young Devourers learned to create energy gardens that could sustain entire civilizations. Older ones discovered artistic expressions that painted with living light across cosmic distances. The elder Devourers wept with joy that could be felt across dimensions. Their children would not have to be refugees anymore. They could go home to a universe that was alive and growing instead of dying and empty. Dr. Walsh made one final discovery that would change both universes forever. The bioharmonic generators they had built were not just creating energy, but also creating connections between realities. The barrier between dimensions had become permeable in carefully controlled ways. "We can go back and forth," Amy explained with excitement that made her voice shake. "The Devourer universe and our galaxy can share resources and knowledge. We're not just saving one reality, we're connecting two." Jake realized that humanity had accomplished something impossible. They had taken their greatest weakness, their chaotic nature, and used it to heal the wounds between worlds. The universe was no longer a place where different species had to compete for resources. It had become a place where difference created abundance. As the expedition prepared to return home, Jake looked back at the Devourer universe and saw something beautiful. Two realities were learning to dance together, their different natures creating harmonies that neither could achieve alone. The galaxy was about to discover that chaos and order together could create wonders beyond imagination. The return to Confederate space was like entering a graveyard. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty as his mixed fleet of human and Devourer ships emerged from the dimensional portal near Harmony Station. What had once been the crown jewel of galactic civilization was now a dark shell drifting in space, its crystal halls silent and empty. Amy Walsh's scanners detected life signs aboard the station, but they were faint and chaotic. The remaining Confederate species had tried to maintain their perfect harmony without human discord to balance it, and the result had been catastrophic. Their unity had become so rigid that it was breaking apart from within. Admiral Kate Sullivan's voice crackled over the communications system from her flagship. "Jake, we're getting distress signals from 17 different sectors. The Confederation is falling apart without something to push against." The irony was not lost on Jake. The same chaos that the Confederation had rejected as destructive was exactly what they needed to stay healthy. Perfect harmony was like a building with no stress supports, beautiful to look at, but ready to collapse at the first strong wind. Lisa Campbell worked frantically at her engineering station, trying to establish contact with the few remaining Confederate worlds. What she found was worse than anyone had imagined. The Etherians had become so unified in their thinking that they could no longer make individual decisions. The synthetics had achieved such perfect logic that they had calculated existence. itself to be inefficient and were slowly shutting down. The peaceful gardeners had harmonized so completely with their plants that they were forgetting how to be separate beings. The resonance, the ancient crystalline beings who had founded the Confederation, were the worst affected. Their perfect crystal forms had become so synchronized that they were merging into a single massive structure that could barely think. They were becoming a monument to unity instead of a living civilization. Jake knew that traditional diplomacy would not work with beings who could no longer understand individual thought. Instead, he authorized Dr. Walsh to begin broadcasting the bioharmonic frequency they had developed in the Devourer universe. The signal carried patterns of controlled chaos that could break up rigid thought structures without destroying them. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Across Confederate space, beings who had been locked in perfect unity began to remember what it felt like to have individual thoughts. The Etherians started making personal decisions again. The synthetics discovered that logic was more powerful when it included creative possibilities. The gardeners learned to love their plants while still being separate from them. But the most remarkable transformation happened to the resonance. As the chaotic frequency reached them, their merged crystal structure began to separate back into individual beings. But instead of returning to their original forms, they evolved into something new. Crystals that could change shape and color, becoming living art that expressed both unity and individuality. Ryan Torres established communication with the recovering Confederate leaders, and what he heard surprised everyone. Instead of anger at humanity's return, there was gratitude mixed with desperate hope. "We understand now," came the voice of the lead resonant, its crystal form shifting through colors that had no names. "Harmony without discord is death. Unity without difference is emptiness. We need what you brought, but we also need to give what we have." The negotiation that followed was unlike any diplomatic meeting in galactic history. Instead of species arguing about territory or resources, they discussed how to create a new kind of civilization that celebrated both unity and chaos, both harmony and difference. Dr. Walsh proposed the Great Resonance, a galaxy-spanning network that would broadcast not perfect harmony but controlled chaos harmony patterns. Every species would contribute its unique frequency while the network constantly shifted and evolved, preventing the rigid unity that had nearly destroyed the Confederation. Lisa Campbell designed the technical systems needed to make the Great Resonance work. Instead of the old harmonic chambers that forced everyone to sing the same tune, the new network would have billions of chaos harmony generators that created different patterns in every system. The result would be a symphony that was always changing, always growing, always alive with possibility. The Devourers volunteered to help build the network, bringing their knowledge of energy cultivation and interdimensional engineering. What had once been the galaxy's greatest threat became its most valuable allies. Teaching other species how to create abundance instead of competing for scarcity, the construction of the Great Resonance took 2 years and required cooperation between hundreds of species. Human chaos drives transported materials across impossible distances. Etherian artists designed energy patterns that were beautiful as well as functional. Synthetic mathematicians calculated probability cascades that turned random events into helpful coincidences. Gardner biotechnology created living components that grew and adapted to changing conditions. But the most important contributions came from unexpected sources. The reformed Devourers shared techniques for energy cultivation that multiplied resources instead of consuming them. Young species that had never been part of the old Confederation brought fresh perspectives that challenged everyone's assumptions. Even artificial intelligences created by the hybrid technology added their own unique voices to the growing symphony. Jake found himself appointed as the first director of chaotic harmony, a position that had never existed because no one had imagined it could be needed. His job was to ensure that the Great Resonance never became too orderly or too chaotic, maintaining the balance that kept both unity and individuality alive. The first activation of the Great Resonance was scheduled for the anniversary of humanity's exile from Confederate space. Representatives from every known species gathered at the rebuilt Harmony Station to witness the birth of a new kind of galactic civilization. As the moment approached, Jake stood before the great assembly and spoke words that would be remembered for millennia. We gather not to sing the same song, but to learn how different voices can create music together. We are here not to eliminate our differences, but to discover how those differences make us stronger. The great resonance came online with a sound that was felt as much as heard. Across the galaxy, billions of beings added their voices to a symphony that was chaotic and harmonious, unified and diverse, predictable and surprising all at the same time. For the first time in galactic history, the universe's song was truly alive. The effects were immediate and miraculous. Worlds that had been consumed by the devourers began regenerating as the new energy patterns healed the damage. Species that had been on the brink of extinction discovered new ways to thrive. Technologies that combined chaos and harmony opened possibilities that no one had dreamed of. Jake retired from active service a year later, but he remained on Harmony Station as an advisor and observer. He spent his days listening to reports from across the galaxy about wonders created by the marriage of order and chaos. New forms of life were evolving that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Entire star systems were learning to communicate with each other. Art and science were becoming indistinguishable as creativity and logic learned to dance together. The story ended where it began, with the morning song that echoed across the galaxy. But now it was different. Instead of perfect harmony that excluded anything chaotic, or pure chaos that destroyed everything orderly, it was a symphony of controlled chaos harmony that celebrated both unity and difference. Jake stood at his window and listened to the song with tears in his eyes. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy not by becoming like everyone else, but by teaching everyone else that being different was the source of all strength. The roar that had once been rejected as discord had become the heartbeat of a new kind of civilization. In the distance, he could see ships from dozens of species working together on projects that would have been impossible under the old system. Human chaos drives worked alongside Etherian artists and synthetic mathematicians to explore new realities. Devourer energy gardens fed entire sectors, while Gardener biotechnology helped them grow beyond anything previously imagined. The galaxy had learned to sing a new song, one that included every voice and excluded none. And at the heart of that song was the lesson humanity had taught them all, that chaos and harmony together could create wonders beyond the dreams of either alone.